Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. My name is Pastor Pat Pearson, and I have joining me today Mrs. Kendra Thornton Fox, Mrs. Cynthia Quinn, Reynolds, Mrs. Lossie Pearson, and once again, I'm your host, Pat Pearson. This afternoon, we'll be discussing living life a new way, navigating life, your new life this afternoon. And we'll be talking about grief. We'll talk about homeschooling, also the teacher's role. We'll also be talking about children and their emotions. So we'll start off with Miss Thornton Fox introducing herself, giving us a little background history about herself and what she do, and to speak on the subject of grief this afternoon. Mrs. Fox, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody is staying safe, social distancing, and looking forward to meeting with families and friends on the outside soon. Um, as Ms. Pearson said, my name is Kendra Thornton Fox. I've been in mental health as a counselor for over 10 years. I'm passionate about people, and I love to assist people with different areas of their life. Now, the subject I'm going to be covering is grief and how we've been affected with grief and how complicated it is since the COVID-19 pandemic started. Um, you know, we have people who are losing relatives and friends, coworkers, and they don't have a way to cope like they naturally would. So one of the issues that we notice is that, we tend to want emotional support, physical support. We want those hugs and kisses, and we can't grieve that same way. So I guess the focus now that we're under this pandemic is to find new ways to cope. And one of the ways is to definitely build on our emotional foundations. And we can do that, from afar, whether we're doing Zoom calls with our family and friends, and we making conscious efforts to schedule time, whether it be daily, weekly, or bi-weekly, to make sure we stay connected. We do also have to kind of distance ourselves from a lot of news media, because what happens is you're already grieving, and then you turn on the news and you're seeing where, the numbers have reached 1,000, 2,000, and the numbers are just overwhelming, and it just triggers more depression and makes the grief process more complicated.
Yes.
I can go through a little bit less of some stages. I just want to make sure people remember that there is no time frame for grieving. You don't have to get over it in a week, a day, a month. It's a process, and your process may be different from mine. It may take me 6 months. It could take you a year. It's just understanding that there is no timetable. Just to be aware, if your mental health is being affected and you are unable to function after a certain time, just to be aware to seek out help if that comes into play.
All right, all right. I have a few questions that people sent via Facebook this week, Kendra.
Okay.
And the first question is, how do you cope when you have had two or more family members to die from COVID-19 and you're unable to say goodbye or bury them?
Yeah, and that's, I hate to hear that. And, I always give my condolences to each person, or to everyone when they've lost a loved one. But we already know it's bad enough to lose one person, but imagine losing multiple people and having to go through the grief process. I'm sure that's difficult. As I said before, the only thing that you can do outside of staying prayerful is to stay emotionally connected to your close ones, close loved ones and friends. And in addition to that, finding healthy ways to deal with their loss. Some of the things, some options are, writing stories, journaling, talking about that loved one, sharing stories about that loved one with family and friends, which can be done through Zoom or done through Skype, whatever type of platform you like to use. That way you have a way to, it's okay to share your experiences about that person, and you're still respecting them. And then you can also, find ways to make new traditions. It's going to be complicated because you do have to mourn the death of more than one person. So you're going to have some good days. And if you get over one person, you may feel like you're dragged back again with a death of a second or a third. But just know that the process, this is our new normal for many of us, and that you can overcome it, but you do have to find healthy ways to process.
All right, all right. Good advice, good advice. The next question we have this afternoon, how can you make it hearing and seeing so many deaths posted on Facebook daily?
Just like we talked about earlier, it's difficult. I mean, you do have to limit social media. Facebook is one of probably the most convenient connections we have to the outside world. Sometimes it's fun and you see games and pictures, but then it also is a lot of doom and gloom. You see a posting where somebody's parent or their child has passed, and then you see it flooding your timeline. So you do have to limit that time. Maybe schedule like maybe 2 or 3 hours a day that you're on social media. Maybe once a day, twice a day, but limit that time you're on Facebook,
Yes.
news stations, etc.
Okay. Yes, that's some good advice. A 24-hour period from social media. Yes, that's good. Also, we have a question from a young lady whose parent was dying. She got the call that they didn't expect her parent to live the next 24 hours, but he was out of state and she left to travel. Her question is, how do she cope with a dying parent in another state? And how would she deal with it mentally by leaving this state and going where he is? So it's like a 2-in-1 question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, that's a complicated situation. I mean, because we know that we're supposed to be practicing social distancing, but this is her parent. And, regret is one of the worst things you would want to deal with, especially during this time. So I can empathize her wanting to drive or get to where her parent is. Just understanding that her interaction with him is going to be limited. She may not be able to go into that hospital or home, wherever he is. So, but she can still know that she made the attempt to be close, and then maybe she can find someone in the staff, maybe a nurse, CNA, or someone that can maybe let that family member use her phone, so at least she can have some kind of connection to them. And that's going to help her. If he ultimately passes away, she would have that as a more of a positive outcome in the grieving process than negative.
Okay, great, great, great. Okay. I'm turning to my next question. This question came from a gentleman last night. He said he's had 13 people to die that was close to him that he knew personally,
Okay.
that worked side by side. Some worked with him and some were close friends, family friends. So what would you say? Do men deal with mental health differently? Do men grieve differently than women? What would you say for the male?
I would say no, they don't grieve it differently. I mean, let me clarify. We all have various ways we do grieve, but as far as the process of grief, it's pretty much the same. It's just how we experience it. Some people cry, some people don't cry, some people yell, some people break things, but the common denominator is everybody is going through the grieving process. It's just how they experience it. It's a journey. That part can change. You may be a person that can be a male, or a female can be a person like they use work as a outlet. They work more, or they find hobbies, or, unfortunately, there are negative ways for people to cope, and we don't want them to go that route. But unfortunately, there is, too much of that going on, and people do have to find healthier ways to deal with it, especially with multiple passing, because grief is about, knowing that it's shock it's denial, it's anger, it's bargaining, and it's depression all sets in until you can get to the point where you can accept that this has happened and I need to make some healthy choices in order to get through this. And so it doesn't matter if it's male or female.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, Mrs. Fox, I thank you this afternoon. Is there anything you'd like to add there?
Not really. Just making sure that people know that grief is is an emotion, and everyone experiences it a little differently. And just knowing that as it's a natural emotion, I should say, and that it's okay to give yourself ample time to get through this.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for your time this afternoon, and thank you for speaking on grief. I'm sure that you have helped many listeners this afternoon. Our next topic, we would move on. Our next topic is talking about homeschooling. We'll be discussing homeschooling, the teacher, navigating your new way of life mentally, and Mrs. Cynthia Quinn Reynolds. Did I get it right, Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms.
Oh, Ms., I'm sorry. She'll be speaking on parenting, homeschooling, and the teacher this afternoon. How are you this afternoon?
I'm good. Good to see all of you.
Good. Good to see you as well. And thank you, Cynthia, for joining us this afternoon, sharing your time with us to help those out there who may be listening. Give us some background history about yourself.
Well, I am a clinical social worker. I was a school social worker for about 23 years with Detroit Public Schools, Wayne Westland Public Schools, and the Southfield Public Schools. Most of the time in my career, I worked with high school students and also elementary and middle school. So I'm very, familiar with the role of the teacher and the students and how the interactions with teachers and parents and students are essential to the student's success in school. As far as parenting, I want all of the parents who are listening to give themselves a break. A lot of times as parents, we expect to have all the answers and we want to be the comforter, the teacher, and everything to our kids. And we navigate that well a lot of times, but now you're put into a position where you have to do it. But don't expect to know everything about those roles. Give yourself a break, give your kids a break, and make this situation something that is going to be more of a positive experience than what we expect. For the teachers out there, you have also an unprecedented role right now. And I know teaching is a very structured profession. And right now we're in unpredictable, unstructured times, so that could be difficult for you as well. But just know that although you have not been named as a first responder for this crisis, you are a first responder. Parents who are listening, believe it or not, sometimes your kids, they respect what the teacher says more than you. They respect the teacher's expertise more than they do our parents.
Yeah.
So they spend a lot of time in school. So I'm very happy that the community, the educational community, has decided to allow teachers to continue to be involved with their students while they're going through this. But as I said, with the parents, don't have the expectation that you should be the know-all or do-all or anything. But I don't want the parents also to underestimate the power and influence that the teacher has. I think one of the good things that has come out of the situation is that people should be able to realize now what the teaching staff, how significant and important they are. So I think that's a positive thing that will come out of it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Cynthia, we have a few questions for you this afternoon. The first is from a teacher. She asks, how do she find a peaceful moment when you're teaching during the day from home, and then you're a parent and then you're a parent with a special needs child. So how do she find a peaceful moment?
Okay. I think that she would need to probably compartmentalize her life like the rest of us right now. Finding a peaceful moment, is that connected to your teaching and your parenting, or is that something separate? So, being in the situation that we're in now, we're not able to really do as many things that I think that we can do, because we have so many other variables that we're dealing with consciously and unconsciously. So I think she needs to maybe try to compartmentalize finding a peaceful moment, separate from her duty as being a teacher and separate from her role as a parent with a child who has special needs. Um, all of the parents are dealing with issues that they have to deal with. And having a child with special needs, as we know, comes with things that are extra. But that still does not take away from your need to find peace, as you stated. So just compartmentalize those things. Time, you do have a schedule. I don't know. I really don't know, because I'm not in the school system right now, how they're implementing. And I'm assuming that it's probably different for each district and student. But I don't know. Maybe they have time now that they have to interact with the students during the day.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
you compartmentalize that. You compartmentalize your peaceful time. You have to schedule that time. That's what I'm doing for myself. I've made, like people are saying, stick to a schedule. What does that mean? You have to actually stick to the schedule, not just say it, actually do it. For example, if you say, I have a schedule, I should be able to ask you, okay, well, what is your schedule? And you should be able to repeat it back to me. If you can't do that, then you don't have a schedule. You're saying that you do. So what I would want her to do, especially since we're in, schedule some time, probably in the evening. I don't know how old the child is. In the evening for yourself, I would say at least 30 minutes. And that may seem like a lot, but we have 24 hours. That means we have 48 sessions of 30 minutes. And you can take one of those 48 times for yourself. Yes. Whether we're in a pandemic or not, as a working woman and professional, you need to do that anyway.
Yes, great advice, great advice. The next question is, how, when you're tired from helping your students via Zoom, how can you help your own child with his homework and your students during the same day?
It's the same thing. Compartmentalizing. If you're an employee, you're being paid, and there are expectations. Just like if you weren't at home, you have to do it within that time frame. After that, then you have to do the normal thing that you would do with your children. Now, we have to be careful too, mentally, not to make the pandemic into something that's so unusual that we can't function. The pandemic is an event that is happening in our lives, but that's it. It's not the whole book of our life. It's just a chapter. So when you were working, going out, driving to a school building and teaching all these kids, how did you help the kids do their homework then? Why has it changed? Because it's a pandemic.
I think it may have changed, not being rude, because the kid is there side by side with you now.
So, but is the expectation for her to help the child while the kid is side by side? Or I'm thinking that, I thought that that she was asking, how can she help her kid? Is she asking, can she help her kid at the same time as she's teaching? Because if that's the question, then realistically, no. That's what I'm saying. You have to look at realistic expectations for yourself. And you may have to look for some different resources. If there's an interruption while you're teaching, which I'm thinking that may be it, there may be an interruption while she's teaching that she has to attend to her child, that she's going to have to find some kind of supports or help. for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want my colleagues to feel free to add, you know, any suggestions or whatever that they may have as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, just feel free to do that. But see, that's the point that I was making. Sometimes we put unrealistic expectations on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. We
You
do.
cannot, yeah, you can't teach and attend to your child at the same time. So you have to find some kind of accommodations or support or something to make that work.
Okay, great. Our next question. How do you deal with grown children living in your home, but going out and in unprotected, not wearing masks or gloves?
Now this person must live on my street and see me coming in and out of my sons coming in and out of my house. But on a serious note, I think the message that was sent to our community was that they were not vulnerable to this disease.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about grown, I'm thinking of the millennials or younger people, that they were not vulnerable. So we have to be aware of the message that they received as the mature person who has had some experience in life, that a lot of times what we hear is not the truth.
Right.
So we have to sit down and have this is what I had to do, a real conversation with our children, because overall, you know, I'm assuming that they do care about us and they do care about our health. But, you know, you got to remember too, even though they're grown, sometimes they have a tendency to think that we're invincible as well.
Yeah.
That we're going to be around forever. And although mom may be close to the 60 mark, well, she ain't 60 yet, and she's pretty healthy. And, you know, it's been 3 weeks. Ain't nobody sick. Yeah. So,
Nobody died.
Right. And people aren't nobody is dying because we are practicing these things. That's the goal of it. So have a realistic conversation with them. And if you are not able to get some resolution, you know, through that, and they continue with that behavior, which is jeopardizing your well-being and their well-being and maybe possibly your life, then you have to have another conversation with them and make a decision to protect yourself. You have to prioritize and protect yourself. That's one of those situations where, you know, they're not little children, where we have to sacrifice some things sometimes for them. You protect yourself. You should be having an adult to adult parenting relationship with your child now anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you make that decision. That's what I did to protect yourself.
Okay.
Great advice.
Our final and last question for you, Mrs. Cynthia.
Mhm.
Stress, pressure, and loneliness. How do you deal with your children saying they are stressed, they're under pressure with this pandemic, and they're lonely?
Okay. Well, the first thing you would do is validate their feelings by listening to them. Don't try to discount their feelings. Well, what do you have to be stressed about? Well, what are you lonely for? We're all still here. You know, a lot of times parents will listen to their children but they're giving feedback. So that invalidates what they're feeling. And we don't want to do that. We want to acknowledge also that those are normal responses and feelings for this kind of situation. Those are
Okay.
normal. And I would also remind them now, everything, you know, we have to remember we have a limited amount of time here, so there's a wide range of children and their age. But I always, in general, remind people that feelings are temporary. They
Right.
come and they go.
Mhm.
They come and they go. You have experienced this before, probably. You will experience it again, and it'll be okay. Also, as far as, what was the last one? You said that they were lonely.
Yes, that's why they're going in and out every day, because loneliness.
Oh, we're talking about the older people then.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh.
now, yeah, okay, you're gonna need to suck it up then. So we're talking about my babies, right? Okay.
No,
if
these-
you grown and you lonely, hey, I'm lonely too.
Right.
And you're gonna be lonely again. But what you're not gonna do is be lonely and risk everybody's life. What you're gonna do is make an adult grown decision and prioritize our health and our safety over your loneliness. And you know what? They have a whole bunch of stuff online. I'm sure people that will want to entertain you. You're gonna have to do that. All right.
All right.
And don't forget to tell me how much you love them before you start the conversation.
That's right.
With that first.
Always, always. Well, bravo. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Too funny.
That was excellent. Next, we have Mrs. Lossie Pearson. Mrs. Lossie Pearson is going to speak this afternoon regarding our children and their emotions while going through this. Mrs. Pearson, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. And I'm just so humbled to be here speaking. I'm a retired educator, and I've been doing professional counseling now, I think probably about 15, 16 years. And it has been such a joy for me to work, especially with young people. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that's always a biggie for me, whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or just on an everyday note, that sometimes we forget that our children have feelings. They have feelings, they have emotions. Everything you're feeling, they're feeling. If you're feeling bad, they are sponges. They suck it off of you. And oftentimes we don't realize, we say, oh, they're kids, they're resilient, they'll be okay, but they're just acting okay. And sometimes we really need to, as Cynthia said, sit down and have a conversation with them. It won't be a grown conversation because many of them are not grown, but we have to sit down and have a conversation with them. See what they're thinking, not to suggest that they feel one way or the other, but to just, hey, how you doing today? What did you think about that? And so that's kind of what we have to do with our children. We have to be especially careful not to discount what their feelings, because if someone dies or passes, they feel bad about it. I mean, they may think, oh, I got to be strong because I don't want mommy to cry. Hey, let's cry together, you know? So they have to have some way of expressing their feelings. I'm a very visual person, and I think most of the young people I work with, they're visual to a certain degree as well. So I always like to give them something that they can do to kind of put their feelings into picture form or visualize them. I strongly encourage young people to journal, always journal. You know, and all the time, journal doesn't have to be writing. It could be drawing pictures or anything like that. Whatever way they want to express themselves in their journal. And parents, let it be private. If they want to share it with you, they can. But sometimes we just need to let them have their own space. If you want to talk to them about their journal, you might say, hey, I wrote this in my journal today. How did you respond to that? I also like to see young people where they have things that they can walk by and remind them where they're supposed to be, like maybe a calming board where they can think of different things that they need to do to help them cope with what they're going through. I just, picture, oh, okay, I'm going to read today, or I'm going to be quiet and meditate today. And don't think your children don't know what that means. They do. They really do know what that means. A lot of the schools are even getting involved in that. So I think that's a great thing for us to do with our children. And mainly, last but not least, to always talk to them. Always, always, always have a conversation with them. And they're going to have a conversation with you. Even when you're tired and you've homeschooled all day, they're going to come in and have a conversation with you. But you have to let them know the door is open. You have to let them know, I'm going to be here for you. Can't do it right now, but I am going to be here for you. And to kind of piggyback on that question that Cynthia had about, how do you deal with your children and deal with, the children you're supposed to be teaching. We almost have to go into a one-room schoolhouse type thing, because you might have more than one child. You might have 2 or 3 children. And so you've got to manage to keep this one occupied while the other one is working on something special, so you're going to have to operate, like you have one-room school. And self-care, hey, that's way up there. You get your self-care and encourage them to have theirs as well.
Okay, great information, Lassie. Lassie, our first question here this afternoon for you. What do you say to a child that's afraid to go outside? They fear catching the virus from hearing all the news and adults.
I think that the first thing you have to tell them is that it's okay to be afraid. That's the first thing. And to let them know that we're going to, if we're going outside, I don't think you should, try to run them up in a store or something if you can avoid it. But if, you want to just make baby steps, let them go outside and sit on the porch, get some fresh air. I think last week we had some 60-degree days. It was a great time to sit outside and get some fresh air. Remind them to use all the necessary precautions as far as wearing a mask, wearing gloves, wash your hands, whatever they have to do to protect themselves, and let them know, I'm not trying to scare you, but these are the things that we need to do, So I think that if we kind of just gently stroke them a little bit and encourage them to go outside, and just let me add, children are not the only ones that are afraid to go outside. There's some adults that are really afraid to go outside, but we have to gradually get them into going back outside, because they will need to return to school. And when they return to school, we don't want them to not be able to go back to school.
Okay, great information. The second question here, Lassie. What do you say to a child that think this is the end of the world?
Well, I would go back to what I said at the beginning. I would have a conversation with them, because I really need to know where they're getting their information from. Why do you think this is the end of the world? And as both of my colleagues have said before me, we need to turn off those TVs, get what information we need, that's going to move us to the next step, and then turn off the TV. I know it's the news, but all news is not good news. All news is not news that we can handle. We need to kind of encourage them not to be on social media, because everything on social media is not necessarily true. And so we need to just try to limit where they're getting the information and the information that they're getting. But it's very important to know where they're getting their information from, and to see if there's any facts behind that. Why do you think that? So.
Okay, Lassie, last question this afternoon. Children are saying they're bored at home. They're missing their friends. They're missing going to school every day. How can you help this child that feel like they're battling depression?
I guess I would try to find out where the depression is coming from, other than the pandemic that we're in, because oftentimes the depression was already there. It's not new. This just kind of, stirred it up a little more. As far as children being bored, I'm not going to tell you what my mom would have told me if I was bored when I was growing up, because they had a different set of rules. But, there's always something you can do. And, my colleagues mentioned having a schedule, and get them up in the morning. Let them get up in the morning. Let them have a schedule. They can do all kinds of things. They can have gym, because if you turn on your TV, you watch YouTube, there are all kinds of exercises and all that great stuff on there. They can have home ec, which they don't even teach in school anymore. You can take them into the kitchen and let everybody cook dinner. Okay, you cook dinner on Monday, and let them do that. Not to mention that's learning, because they're going cross-curriculum. They're learning math, they're learning reading. They're getting all kinds of things out of that cooking experience. So you got to be a little bit creative with your children. They might get bored if you're just giving them the handouts that the teacher sent to them. They might get bored. So you've got to be a little bit creative.
Okay, great answer. Well, we thank you this afternoon, ladies. I do have a couple of more questions, and any one of you can answer this. I guess any one of you, or Kendra, is it rude for people?
That means Kendra, you
Is it rude for people to ask, How did your family member or friend die through a Facebook post?
Oh, yes. And, I've seen that a few times. And it's a two-part thing to that. First part being that, once you make a post on Facebook, you are actually giving people permission to comment. When you make a post saying, pray for me, my cousin passed away, people are going to comment. But I do think you can take control of the situation, and I think you should take control of your statement. So maybe if you post, please pray for me, my cousin passed away, and, at this time, I don't either care to talk about the circumstances, or you can list it, and that way you stay in control of the narrative at that point.
Okay.
And I just want to say, it's always rude to ask how someone died, whether it's on a Facebook post or if someone just tells you. If they want you to know, I feel like they will tell you.
I agree with that, Lossie. I just think, because we're in a social media stage, people feel that because they're not physically in front of you, they can say whatever. And so I do agree with that too. It is rude, but we live in a new time. Well, everything goes on social media.
Right. Good one. I like that. Next question. Should there be, how do you think a child releasing everything by playing PlayStation is helpful during this pandemic, since they cannot go outside and cannot play with friends? Is that a coping mechanism?
I think it is a coping mechanism, but I think it should be limited like any other, anything else. I mean, if they could stay on Facebook all day, but I think there should be limits. It is a coping mechanism, but I think it should be limited.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think so too. You should definitely limit it, because people were using that as a babysitter or for all of their time spent before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is an opportunity, like my colleagues were saying earlier, to help your kids learn some different skills that they can do that they need, like maybe sewing on a button or hemming up some pants, or,
Paying some bills.
Making a mask.
Yeah. What products do you use when you mop the floor? Because I realized, I didn't teach my kids some of those things, and they need to know that.
Yes.
You don't mix ammonia and bleach. That don't go together. There's a lot of stuff, like we said, Lossie was saying earlier, that we can do and teach our kids to take that time. But what you can't do, which I think is unfair to the kids, for parents, a lot of times we'll limit that time, and then we don't have any alternate behaviors or activities for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not fair to them either.
Okay. Last question before we move on the topic of faith. The last question. How do you cope teaching the children, having time by yourself when you're in a house of 11?
Ooh,
8 kids, and the rest are adults.
So before the pandemic, were you in that house with 11 people?
I guess they were.
Okay, so I guess that seems to be like a common theme to me, and I'm glad that these questions have come up with people in their thinking. The only different variable is that we're isolated, which is a big variable, don't get me wrong, and we're in a pandemic. But don't make it so big that what you were doing before becomes something that you can't do now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Anyone
it is different.
else?
You are in together, but some of that, you can't undo the 8 people, right? In the house. So.
Right. Perhaps to spend some time together, playing some games, painting a couple of walls, doing some things like that as a family. I mean, 11 people, you can sit down and play cards or, Monopoly or something like that. Maybe, you can't do it every day, but there are days that you would be able to do that. Or maybe you can look outside of your house and maybe there's something you can do for an elderly neighbor. Maybe all of you can get out and go rake her grass because spring is coming, and you know how you want to get all the dead leaves and everything. So once again, I think that we have to call on our creativity. You know, it's like, you know, just wonder, well, oh, what's going to happen? Think beyond that.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like too, if people are together now with that many people, because I've never lived with that many people before, you probably would have to set up, now that I think more about it, like some time or space, some safe space away from each other. If you have room in the basement or in the house, like, hey y'all, when people go in here, you know, they get 15, 20 minutes or whatever, you know, of uninterrupted time. Exactly. That would be one intervention that you definitely have to do, because sometimes you just need that time. It might have to be the bathroom, depending on the side of the house. I don't know.
And I was just going to add to that, Cynthia, because a lot of times I do have people who have multiple family members in one place, and the car is the new best friend for a lot of people.
Yes,
yes,
true.
Yes.
Having that moment to just make a phone call, just sit there. So you do have to have some healthy boundaries with that many people, but you know, it's times together, times apart, but you're gonna have a new normal now, right? People gonna learn how to love on each other a whole lot differently.
Right. Since it's warming up now, I agree with that car thing. And I have told my family members too, everybody, you know, we gotta give each other a pass right now.
Yes.
You gotta give each other.
You get a pass. Yes.
Yeah, everybody's getting passes now.
Yeah.
That might have to be said over, you know, and over again.
Yes. Well, once again, ladies, I would like to thank you for coming this afternoon, for participating. I would like to thank you for giving of yourself and your time. Thank you you were a panel of experts this afternoon, and I'm sure that our listeners, this will help them. I'm sure those that emailed their questions and text their questions and inbox, they receive good answers and that will help them cope over the next week, over the next month, probably the rest of their life. It would be some new techniques that they can use. So once again, I would like to thank you. We're moving forward on speaking about faith this afternoon. I have been receiving a lot of phone calls and emails where the faith is wavering during this season. The question is, they can't see God during this season. Is God with me? Will God deliver me? And my answer is always yes. God is always with us. He did not leave us here alone. He did not only say it once in Deuteronomy, but he said it twice. He said it in Deuteronomy, Joshua, and in Hebrews, that he would never leave us nor forsake us. So we have to hold on to our faith to know that God is with us. During this time that we're going through, we're going to have to depend on our spirituality. We're going to have to depend on our relationship with God. We're going to have to not depend and not lean not to our own understanding, but seek his wisdom and his advice. In Psalms 34:17, it says, when the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all of their troubles. So you got to know, when you're talking to God, God hears you, and God has a plan for you, a plan for us to escape this pandemic that we're in right now. We have to hold fast that God said that he will supply every need according to his riches and his glory in Christ Jesus, that all our needs will be supplied going through this, that we would not go without anything. And then Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. So God knows your beginning and your end. He knows where you're going to be this time next year. He knew that this afternoon that we would be here, that you would be listening to it. He knew that whoever had the questions would be asking the questions. He knew who needed to hear these responses, these answers that we gave this afternoon. So God already knows, and God cares for us. So with our faith, we have to keep our faith in God. We cannot let our faith waver. We cannot let fear come in and set in. We have to let faith combat that fear. We cannot be fearful with going out. Yes, there are some things that I can pray for, but you all as professionals, there are some things that you handle professionally that it takes prayer and professional counselors. So I do advise others that see me and see professional counselors. Speak with both. And the word says, let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. So through this time, don't let your heart be troubled. Don't be confused in your faith. Don't be confused and doubt who you are during this time. Don't be confused and doubt your future and your children's future. Even though we have everyone around us that we may see what's happening on the news, we still have to have faith that God is in control. We have to have faith that God gives the doctors and the nurses and the paramedics them the strength to continue work, and the scientists the strength to find a vaccination for what is going on. We have to have faith that God will keep the workers that's in Kroger, Sam's Club, Costco's healthy and protected. We have to have faith that God will touch our government, those stimulus checks that you may receive another stimulus package if we have to be off. So we have to continue to walk in faith and walk in trust in God in every aspect, in every area of our lives, and for our children. And then we have to sit down and speak to our children about faith. We have to teach them about faith. As we know, I remember being a little girl hearing my mother's stories, my sweet grandmother's stories about things that she did when she worked back in the 60s and sitting on the back of the bus. So those stories that our parents poured into us, telling us about their faith, this is a time that we have to pour our stories into our children so they'll know about faith, and then they'll know how God bring you over, how he brought our foreparents over, how he's going to bring us over in this pandemic right now. So we're ending on a note of have faith and know that God will bring us over. God will carry us through this, that we are sitting in God's hand. He said the earth is his footstool. So we're at the feet of God, taking all our cares, casting all our cares and concerns at his feet, and God's ears is open and God is moving. He's doing something at this very moment. So I just want to encourage everybody to walk in love, to walk in peace, and most of all, to walk in faith. Ladies, do you have anything you'd like to end with?
Amen.
Amen. Stay
Amen.
safe.
And amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. Once again, thank you for coming, and thank you all for joining in. This concludes our time here and ends our meeting. Until next time, be blessed and walk in faith.